Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca, and today I'm talking about the books that I read in January. So in January I read 8 books in total. Let's go over some stats first. 1 was nonfiction. 3 of them were YA, which is very surprising because I've not read a lot of YA in a while, so 3 in 1 month, crazy. I read 1 historical romance, I read a classic, I read a graphic novel, I read some literary fiction, very widespread, different categories. Love it. 4, so half of them were written by BIPOC authors, so people who are not white, and 2 of them featured LGBTQ plus relationships and characters. Alright, and so without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump into the books themselves. So the first book that I read on January 2nd in one day, and that was 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. This is kind of her memoir of a time in her life when she was writing back and forth with this bookstore in England, and it takes place after World War II, I'm pretty sure, and just because of the times, Helen is finding it very hard to find specific books that she wants, or specific editions. In her area, she's living in New York, so she writes a letter to this bookstore in England. I think that she was recommended the bookstore from a friend, I think, and it just starts this relationship that she has with the specific person that she's writing to, and then also with the bookstore as a whole. It is so adorable. This book is also less than 100 pages, it's very quick, and it's just a collection of the letters, so it's an epistolary book, and I just loved it so much. I really love the format of epistolary novels, and I guess nonfiction as well. I really like it. So that was definitely a plus, and I also love reading books about books, because it just makes me so happy as a bookworm and a reader to connect with someone in that way, and to see how books have connected others, even from long distances, you know? It's very fun. I loved Helen's personality. That really came through in the letters that she was writing. She was very quirky, very sarcastic. She was just very caring as well for these people, because in England at the time there was a lot of restrictions on rations for certain things like sugar and things like that because of the war, and so she ends up like buying them a Christmas ham at one point and just doing a lot for them because she could, and it's so nice, and it made me feel just so happy. A lot of the books in the book that she like is looking for or she's referencing, I'm like, I don't know any of these titles, so not something that people are reading today, more like classic nonfiction, I would say. A lot of it was collections of different authors and whatnot. Definitely something that I would never read, but I still enjoyed hearing them talk about it. So even if you're not interested in the types of books that somebody at that time would be reading, it was still very just heartwarming, and I loved it so much. So that one, definite 5-star for me. Starting the year off strong. First book I read of 2021, and it was a 5-star read. My second book of January was a finished book from 2020, and that was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. It is the first novel in the Bridgerton series. Bridgerton is also adapted by Netflix, if you haven't seen that yet. I also have an entire video talking about my thoughts, book versus adaptation, so if you're interested in that, I will leave it in the description box and also in the cards. So definitely look for that if you're interested in hearing more about Bridgerton. I'm not going to talk about it a lot here. I'll give you the basic setup. Daphne is going through another season as a woman who is trying to find a proper suitor and get married, and our hero is Simon, whose father recently died, so he is the new Duke of Hastings, making him one of the most eligible bachelors in society, and he does not want to get married, so they come up with this like fake courting scheme basically to get what they each need, and romance. I gave this book 3 stars. There is kind of an icky trigger warning here for sexual abuse, rape. So there is kind of an icky scene that I really didn't like, and that definitely dropped it down a couple of stars. The reasons I really liked this book was the Bridgerton siblings in general. They are all very fun, very opinionated. I really just loved their interactions with each other, so that's definitely the reason why I will be continuing with the series. The next book is about Anthony, who's the oldest son, and I really hated his character in the adaptation, the Netflix adaptation, so I definitely want to read the book to kind of get that out, you know, just like palate cleanse, get rid of that. Don't want it in my brain anymore. So definitely will be reading the next book. Will I be watching the next season of Bridgerton? Feelings of the series aside, I'm really bad at finishing TV series, so there's a great chance that I won't finish it just because of that and nothing to do with the series at all. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe. The next book that I read in January was Persephone. It's a graphic novel. It's a retelling of the Persephone Hades myth. It's not. I gave this book 2 stars. The story and what it was, take out the names, the expectation of it being a Persephone Hades retelling. It's a pretty good story. Pretty interesting, you know? The author calling this a Persephone Hades retelling kind of just really irks me because it is not. Like, Hades is dead. He's been dead for however long. And I'm sorry, this is a spoiler, but I do not recommend this book. I didn't like it. The only thing I really loved, I guess, was the art style. It was very well done. The Persephone Hades myth is like my favorite Greek myth besides like Medusa. Like they're my favorite. And it's also like I'm currently obsessed with Lore Olympus, which is a webcomic about the Hades Persephone myth, and it's fantastic. And then just reading this was kind of just like a super let down. Don't love it. At all. He also wrote a kind of retelling of Pocahontas. I think I might read that if it's been translated to English yet, just because I want to see, you know, like what he does with that, because I think that one might be a little trickier because you could be very offensive to like native peoples. But anyway, so I'm not even going to tell you what this book is about because I don't really remember. Like, I didn't like it. It's not going to stick with me. I really disappointed in it, and there it is. Yeah, that's it. I'm done. Goodbye. And then to lift up my spirits, I read my favorite book of January, Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. I loved this book. I have not been a huge fan of YA contemporary for a while just because I feel like a lot of it, my issue with YA contemporary is that I think because a lot of adults who are writing YA books either don't remember what it's like to be an actual teenager, or they're trying to push an agenda, so it comes off very just like not realistic at all. And then there's also this thing, I think it's happening a lot of in YA in general, where you want to have, like authors want to have such depth and layers in their novels that they include so many storylines that by the time the story finishes, there are things that are unanswered. Okay, so these are the things that I find really frustrating with YA contemporary specifically. And the reason that I loved Felix Ever After, I gave it 5 stars, is because it does not fall into this trap. Case and Calendar does interweave like these very intricate plot points and different plot lines, different things, but they're all completed by the end of the novel and not in a way that it is like conveniently wrapped up with a bow, you know, like it made sense. Nothing was left unanswered, and the answers that I got weren't just like them trying to conveniently come up with something because they don't want to end their novel with no answers. So fantastic job in the actual writing of this novel. Very well done. Also, the characters were very well written, very nuanced. I just really enjoyed reading about Felix and what he's going through, and then the different characters that he interacts with and what they're going through. So I just felt like it was very well done in that respect as well. Also, it is a book about a trans boy, and there are a lot of other LGBTQ characters in it, so I felt like it was very educational in a very entertaining way, which is definitely a plus for a fiction novel. This was the first time I've ever heard the term dead name, referring to a trans person's old name. And then I feel like after, it's like one of those things where you hear something for the first time, or so you think, and then you just hear it everywhere. So that was happening to me. I was like, oh yeah, I know what that means now. So the setup with Felix Ever After is that Felix, who is a trans boy, is kind of coping with, you know, being out and explaining this to his father and, you know, his relationships with other people, and then something happens in his school where an unknown person hangs all of these pictures of Felix before his transition, along with his dead name. And so, of course, he's traumatized because this is traumatic bullying. And so he's basically just trying to figure out who it is. That's like the main plot point of the novel. And then there's like a romance, and there's just friendship things. There's like a lot of commentary on how trans people are treated, and things like ways that you may not have realized that trans people are abused. And so it was just a very good novel that handled these very heavy themes, but also had this very lighthearted and fun and romantic ending, and I loved this book. I highly recommend Felix Ever After. If you have never read a book by a trans person or about a trans person, this, I think, is a great place to start. I absolutely adored it. 100% recommend. The next book I finished was also carryover from 2020, and that was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I finally finished it. Me and a couple of my friends decided that we were going to buddy read it together, and we had this great plan to read like the first part of it and then, you know, have a discussion over Zoom, and then read the second part of it and have a discussion over Zoom, you know, halfway through December and then the end of December. We did the first time, but I wasn't even where I was supposed to be at that point, so December was just not a very good reading month for me, so I definitely just, you know, I just carried it over, and I tried to be okay with that, and so I finally finished it in January, and I definitely gave it 5 stars, loved it. It's definitely kind of like a comfort read, I think. A lot of people I've heard say that they're going to pick it up all the time if they ever need a comfort read. I 100% agree with that. I really loved the characterizations. Here's the thing that I kind of disagree with a lot of people. I think besides Jo being like, she's just a very good character, so I feel like she's definitely my favorite, but I know a lot of people hate Amy. She was my second favorite character. I loved Amy's character, and I guess a lot of people find her annoying, but I'm like, she's the youngest, you know, like, she's gonna be a little annoying, but I just feel like her storyline was really great and she grew a lot. But as did all of the sisters. The one thing that I don't like, and this is mainly about the first part of the novel, is that Louisa May Alcott kind of like sets up each chapter as like a lesson learned to the audience, and I did not like that. It's like, I'm not here to be taught a lesson about morals and whatnot. I'm here to be entertained. Like, I didn't like that. But it didn't really inhibit me from giving it 5 stars, so it's not like a huge deal. Definitely enjoyed the second part of the novel better, and I feel like this is also one of the reasons I really love the Greta Gerwig adaptation, because she goes back and forth between the past and the present, and I feel like that would have made this novel better for me, because the past, so part 1, was very dry, and that's the reason why it took me so long to finish, whereas with the present, it was more interesting, more entertaining, so I think weaving those in together was very smart on Greta Gerwig, and I really enjoyed that about the adaptation, and still love it. Still love it, still love the book. Fantastic. First classic finished for 2021. The next book I read in January was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I have heard a lot about this novel before I'd read it myself, and all I had heard was that it was about performative activism, which, yes, but I feel like it's very almost like it hurts the novel by just for it to just be about performative activism, because like even with the title Such a Fun Age, I think that really tells you what Kylie Reid was wanting to write about, as well as the performative activism. But anyway, here's the setup of the book. So our main character, Amira, is a babysitter. She has 2 part-time jobs. She's a babysitter for this one family, and then she's secretary, transcriber, I don't remember. And one night, the family is having a bit of a stressful situation where the police are going to be coming to their house, and so they call Amira and ask her if she can take their toddler to just take her somewhere so that, she doesn't get stressed out by this whole thing, which sounds reasonable, right? So Amira goes, she had just left a friend's birthday celebration and goes with this toddler to a fancy grocery store that's in this area, and she basically is accused of kidnapping this child because she's black and the child is white. So that's kind of how the novel starts. And then because of this situation, her employer, Alex, wants to basically show her that they care about her and that they're there for her, and that even with this situation that they still want to employ her and that she did nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. But also with Amira, because this is about her. She's at that point of her life where she's about to turn 26, so she's about to be kicked off of her parents' insurance, and she still only has 2 part-time jobs, so she won't be able to get health insurance through either one of her employers. And so she's having this really tough time about finding a job that she really wants, and then all of her friends are getting these great jobs with these great salaries and benefits and blah, 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 and she kind of just feels left out and that she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life yet. So this book is about performative activism when it comes to Alex and her story. When it comes to the main character, Amira, it's not just about that. It's about her discovering what she wants to do. It's about it's a coming of age for adult. I think I really identified with her a lot because I just turned 26 and I was just kicked off of my parents' insurance and I only have a part-time job. So I definitely identified with her character. So there are a lot of layers to this novel, which I think was really great. I really loved it. It was also very funny, entertaining. I really loved Amira as the main character. I think it was a great viewpoint for white people to read, for a black person who something like this happens and there's a white person who keeps pushing her to report it to the police or blah blah blah, and she's just no, I don't want to. So I think it's a really great viewpoint for white people to read because it shows, just because this was wrong and you want to show that you're anti-racist doesn't mean that you should push someone into doing something that they may be uncomfortable with, or also that they don't want to make a big deal out of it because things happen when, they do. So, great viewpoint. I really enjoyed the book. Also, Amira and the little girl that she babysat, they were so adorable. Loved that in the book as well. And then I just thought that the ending was really well done. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. I gave this book 3 stars. I really enjoyed the non-Western fantasy aspect of it, with the author being Chinese, and so having that kind of inspiration to her fantasy world. I really enjoyed that. And I think the main character had a really good foundation of being developed. Definitely could have more work done on that. And I did feel like the story was entertaining. There wasn't a time where I don't want to finish, I don't want to read this anymore, so it was entertaining. However, my main issue in this book is that there are so many unanswered questions, and there are some things that just don't make sense in this book. So here's the setup for the story. Our main character, Lee, is forcibly kidnapped from her home in the beginning of the novel to become a paper girl. And paper girls are basically concubines for the king. And while humans are the ones who are paper girls, she never thought that she would have been picked for one because she lives in a very poor village that's very far away from the center of the kingdom. And her parents are really poor, and just there are so many reasons why she would never have thought this was for her. but she has golden eyes, and the the general who comes to kidnap her is doing it because of her golden eyes, which a lot of people perceive to be lucky, and therefore that's why he's kidnapping her, because he thinks having her as a paper girl will bring him back in favor with the king. So that's the setup. So I did my previous video before this one was a reading vlog where I talk a lot about Girls of Paper and Fire. So if you're interested in spoilers and how I feel about them, I will put that in the description box, and I will try to put it in the cards as well. So definitely check that out for more spoilery information, but there are a few parts in the story where I'm just like, no, that doesn't make sense, no. There are also one thing that I felt, and I don't think this is really a spoiler, that was really lacking in this book was world building. In the beginning of the book, I was really happy because there wasn't like a bunch of world dumping, but by the time I got to the end of the book, I felt like I had so many questions because there wasn't sufficient world building in this book, and I'm really hoping that the author fixed it or expanded on it in the second book, which I probably will read eventually. But it's not something that I need to read immediately because ultimately not the best book that I've read. A little disappointing. This book also has LGBTQ plus representation in it, so I think that was fantastic. I think there were good examples of female friendships, of, you know, ups and downs and stuff like that, and also like, as there are 8 paper girls, you would expect there to be a lot of competition between them, and there is a reasonable amount, but there's also a lot of friendship within this group, and them supporting each other and just things like that. So I do feel like the relationships, the friendships specifically in this book, were very well done. But again, you know, there are definitely issues with this book. So yeah, if you're a YA fantasy fan, I definitely would recommend it, but if you're not, probably skip this one. And the final book I read in January was Love is a Revolution by Renee Watson. This book also was very disappointing. I was really excited to read this book because of the different body type representation. You know, this is a YA contemporary romance, and the main character is fat. So love it, okay? And I love the cover. And when I started reading it, I really loved the main character and her convictions, what she was important and things like that. But it went downhill quite a bit because of the love interest. I hated the love interest. I did not think that they had any chemistry whatsoever, and I felt that he was so pushy that it was making me uncomfortable. Like, these are fictional characters. Like, if I was ever in a relationship like that, I would have broken up with said person because it made me, like, it was just, I did not like it. It was, like, icky at a point. I did not think it was a healthy relationship, and they do kind of discuss it a little bit, but not in the way that I think should have been done. So, 2 stars. I really enjoyed the main character, but I hated the love interest, and by the time the ending was coming, I was just skimming because I was just not interested in reading it anymore. I was just bored, and just like, I didn't want to read any more of it, but I did. I finished the whole thing, so I did it. Yay. So the setup with this novel is a girl who, Nala, who is living with her cousin, who is a part of this group called Inspire Harlem, which is kind of like a community group where they, you know, volunteer, and, you know, volunteer work is really important to them. And like, I feel like the main point of their work as a part of this novel was about caring for the environment, which I 100% like support this, but the way that they did it to her, the main character Nala, I was just like, no. I just felt like they were really hard on her. So yeah, 2 stars, didn't like it. Sadly, this was the first book that I read by Renee Watson. I think like most of her other books are children's books, so I'm wondering if those will be better. Definitely want to give them a try, but Just was not a fan of this one. Also forgot real quick, another thing I didn't like about Love is a Revolution is that it does fall into that trap that I was talking about earlier about YA novels and authors who like to add in so many plot points and just layers that things are left forgotten at the end, where I'm just like, you didn't resolve this, so you shouldn't have put it in the novel. 2 things like that happened in this, and I was not happy about it, so that's another reason why I gave it only 2 stars. And that is it for my January wrap-up. These are the books that I read. Found a new favorite YA contemporary, so that's amazing. Never thought that would happen. It was a pretty average, I would say, reading month for me. I'm hoping to read a lot more books in February, even though it's a shorter month. We'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought about them, and I will see you in a new video soon. Bye.